All right. Hey, if this is your first time jumping on here, I'm going to try and go through some absolute beginner tutorials for Photoshop. So if you're really new to the program, don't know where to start, that's what this is for. I'm hoping this will give you a better idea of some of the very basic things in Photoshop. And then as I put more of these videos on, that should help you as far as having kind of stepping stones in getting started with Photoshop. So this is your first time opening it. I'm using Photoshop 2020, but the tutorial I'm doing should work for pretty much any version of Photoshop. Again, I'm just going to be hitting some of the beginner tools, and then later videos I'll add some additional things on. So starting out though, whether you're using this version or a different one, you can go to File and Open. So for any images you're wanting to use, this is kind of basic steps you'll take. Go to File and Open. Mine, I have one already downloaded that I'm wanting to use. Go ahead and open that one. And this is a very kind of basic tutorial that you'll see a lot of either schools or classes use. It's basically called Veggie Face. So essentially what you're doing is you have this object here on the right, I don't know if it's a squash or whatever it is, and you're basically going to be cutting out these objects to then create a face on top of it. So I'll show you some, again, basic tools that you need for this one. And really the only tools we need for this are going to be these first three tools here on the left. So I'm just giving you kind of a little rundown. This is your workspace here in the middle. You have your basic kind of drop-down menus at the top, so that's File, Edit, and so on. Your tools are here on the left. Then you'll see things over here on the right, such as layers, adjustments, and so on. You probably want to be working with layers. You can see that's going to be kind of the main one we'll be looking at. I believe sometimes it may be down here on the bottom. Either way, it's the same thing there. Okay. So just to start out, we have the basic tool for here for moving objects. Looks like 4 arrows. So just showing you, if I try to move this one, right now the layer has a lock on it. So this is just asking if I want to remove that and make a normal layer. You can go ahead and convert it if you want. But that's all that first tool does, it just moves objects. So I'm going to undo that. And I just did that by hitting Control Z, or you can go to Edit and Undo. I'll have a shortcut there as well. So let's go and look at this next one. So this next group here, you should see looks like a rectangle. But if you click and hold on that, it'll pull up some additional options as well. So we have the rectangular marquee, elliptical marquee, single row, and single column. I'll be honest, the single row and single column I don't use practically ever. The only use I've really seen for those is if you're trying to select a either line or column of text. That's the only time I've seen those being used. But let's look at the elliptical marquee. That's a pretty good one for this project. So went ahead and selected that one. Again, just click and held on it, elliptical marquee, then release it with the mouse. And I'm going to just try and select this object here. So with this tool, whenever I click and hold and drag, and I'm still holding down, I have not released with the mouse button, you can see that it's basically resizing this area that I'm trying to select. And right now, let's say I don't like this, I've already released it with the mouse, so you can see it's more kind of in a finalized state here. If I don't like that, I can just right click and deselect, or Control D to deselect as well. But I'm going to try and get a selection of this one. I'm going to click and hold and drag across. And so you can see on this bottom right, it is lined up pretty well, but it's not lined up on the top left. We can really easily fix that. So while I'm still holding down the mouse button, so I've not released the mouse button, I'm also going to hold down spacebar. And so you can see whenever I hold down spacebar, it'll let me shift that adjustment there. Basically, I can move it. So I'm going to kind of get that top left edge lined up. And again, I'm still holding down the left mouse button, but I'm going to release spacebar and it'll go back to resizing it. So same thing, hit spacebar to kind of realign it and adjust that to get it lined up there. So from here we can get a pretty good selection. So I'm going to adjust it just a little. That's pretty good there. Okay, if this project doesn't be perfect, I'll show you more precise ways later. This is just giving us a good start. Okay, so we have our selection here. From here, I'm just going to do a edit, copy, and edit and paste. So edit and copy. Again, you can use the shortcut there, Control C, then edit and paste. So right now it doesn't look like it did anything, but if we look at our layers, you can see there's something, there's a new layer here. And if I turn off this background layer, you can now see this object here just by itself. And that's the piece we just copied and pasted. And just showing you the eyes here, that just turns the visibility on or off on those layers. Basically, you can temporarily hide a layer if you don't want to look at that yet. So if you're working on something else. But I'm going to go back to the Move tool. So your tool's over here at the far left side. Click this first one, and then click and hold and move that object now. Okay, and I'll leave it there just so we can visually see that separation a little easier. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and try doing another circular selection using the elliptical marquee tool. I'm going to click back on that one, and I'm going to try and get a selection as kiwi to use for one of the eyes. So again, I'll actually redo that part and deselect it. Click and hold, and I'm still holding down the left mouse button. Now if I want to get that other part kind of lined up or move my selection, I'm going to also hold down spacebar. Get that lined up a little better. Once it's close, I can go back to, so release spacebar, and then go back to resizing it. So still holding down the left mouse button. Okay, from here I'm going to copy and paste that one. So edit, copy, edit, paste, or Control C. Okay, if it gives you this error here, which is pretty common, basically what it's saying is the area it's trying to select is empty. So, but if we look, we can see this here, but I'll tell you what it's doing. Looking at your layers, we have this top layer selected. So if we hide this background layer, right now this is what it's trying to select, which is nothing. There's nothing right there. This checker grid just means it's transparent. So based off that logic, yes, there's nothing for it to select. So we have to click back on this background layer. So we're telling it this is the layer we want to copy from. So same thing, we're going to copy and paste. Now we can see that layer shows up. Turn back on there, we can see it's now separate. So I'm going to go back to my Move tool. The shortcut for that is V. If you hit V on the keyboard, it'll jump you back to it. I'm going to move that object. So now you'll see it's moving behind this this other piece we've cut out or copied. And that's just because the layers, it's below the other one. So think of your layers as images that are stacked on top of one another. So whatever's at the top, that's what's going to get priority and show first. So since we want this showing first, I'm just going to click on it. So click and hold and drag it up one spot. You can see that blue line showing up. You can click there. Okay, now go back to move it and have that object here. So but let's say I want to make another eye, but I want it to match this one exactly. Like I don't want to have to copy this one. I can just duplicate that layer. So over here on layer 2, which is the one for that eye, or the kiwi selection there, I'm just going to basically duplicate this layer. So duplicate layer. This is just asking if you want to rename it. I'm just going to leave it on the default. Then I have that copy I can now move. Okay, so we have this kind of a face starting to take form. But right now, with the tools that we've been using, not really going to work, especially for like the mushroom or this here, which I'm not really sure what that is, I'll be honest. Maybe a radish, but regardless, it won't work for those. So let's go ahead and look down at this third set of tools here, which will be the last set we'll look at. And these are going to be your different lasso tools. So I'm going to click and hold on that one. Just show you have the lasso, polygonal, and magnetic. So the lasso tool is just a very kind of free form selection, but let's start with that one. Okay, so we have this first lasso tool selected, lasso tool there. And what we can do with this is if we move down to part of the image and click and hold and just drag. So I'm just holding down with the mouse button, you can see that it's going to follow your hand movement there. So it's kind of a very free form like way to get a quick, rough selection of something. So it does a decent job, but you can see again, you have to have a pretty steady hand. And like, let's say I messed up over here, then came back. With any of these tools, wherever you start, you want to end back at that point. so it makes a full kind of circle around the object. You can see I've got a little extra over here. We can clean that up. So with any of the lasso tools, you should have these options at the top to either add or subtract from your selection. So if I wanted to add spots back in, I can use that. I'm going to subtract from it. So I'm just going to go around this area I don't want. And again, you need to circle the whole area that you're trying to either select, whether that's adding or removing. You can see how it removed that. Alternatively, if I was wanting to add something, so let's say I wanted to add like this part of the mushroom, I'm just going to go around that spot there. So this is a pretty good selection there. So from here, just like before, I'm going to copy and paste. But I want to be aware of the layer I have selected. So basically I'm telling it, this is the layer that I want to copy from. So copy and paste. So edit copy, edit paste. And I have that object separate now. Back to my move tool. And I'm just going to move that up to the top. Yeah, and then I'll go ahead and shift these down. So you can hold control and select each of these layers. Or if you're on like a layer at the top, then you go down to a layer below. If you hold down shift and click, it'll select all the layers in between. You can do that as well. Just shift that one down, shift that as well. It lines up a little bit better. Okay, from here, I'm going to go and try and select these. And you can see it has a pretty rough edge on it. So this first lasso tool may not be a good option. Let's look at polygonal. So polygonal is going to work really well if you have objects with a lot of straight lines or edges. So for instance, if we were trying like this edge over here, I can click once, and I'm not holding down the mouse. As I move it, it's giving like a preview of where I would if I click again. If I click again there, you can see it does a pretty good job on that edge. But for the rest of the object, it is curved. So this one, obviously isn't working too well for that. So, and if you can't remember where you started, if you just get close, you'll see that little circle pop up on the cursor, or you can double click with your mouse and it'll finish it out for you. Okay, so then it's a little rough, so I'm just going to deselect that one. So right click and deselect, or do Control D to remove that. And then let's go back and look at it again. So polygonal might work if they have a lot of straight edges. Let's look at magnetic. And so magnetic works by looking at the image and trying to determine where the edges are located. So like, I'm going to zoom in on this one. I'm going to hold Control and hit plus. Zoom in a little bit there. So you can use these scroll bars or hold Control to move side to side. But anyway, I'm just going to click once and start moving the mouse along the edge. You can see it's trying to basically auto-determine where that edge is located. And so all those little dots it's making, it's doing that on its own. I'm not clicking the mouse, I'm just moving along the edge. So it's not perfect, but it's getting pretty close. If there are spots I want to add those anchor points, I can click with the mouse to kind of help it out in a sense. Just move along there. And for this tool here, it really works better if you can move kind of slow with it. So, and again, some of those anchors points where if you have a sharper turn, so like some of those dips there, just help it out by clicking to add some anchor points. Okay, so we have a pretty good selection of that one. Go ahead and copy and paste it. So Control C. Oh, same thing, got to go back to the background layer. Control C, Control V. You have this one copied here. Okay. So one thing to point out with this tool is it does work better if you move slower. So just showing you, like if I click here and try to just kind of move pretty quick on it, it does a decent job, but it did kind of miss a lot along the top and added a little bit of kind of white parts in the background. So you can always go in and clean it up by using the add or subtract. Like I can click add there and move along this edge I'm wanting to add back in. But again, I want to go around the entire area here. So could clean that up the way. Or go to subtract and remove some of this along the edge here that it maybe got a little too much. So just circle that part I want to remove. So you do have those options, but again, it just tends to work a little better if you just take your time on it. As most things in Photoshop will be that way. Okay, But I'm going to go ahead and move this object here. So again, it's going behind it. So I just need to move that layer above the objects there. And I'm going to hold Control and hit minus just to kind of zoom out. Okay, so it's looking pretty decent. From here, we have this object here, and I want it to be the other eyebrow as well. Again, I can just duplicate it, just like we did for the eyes. I'm just going to right-click, duplicate layer. So we have the copy now, but it's not a mirror or like reflection of this one on the left. So it's even behind the eye. There we go. But it's still not a mirror of the other one. So we can fix that. And probably the easiest way is just if we go to Edit, and we do have some transform options like flip horizontal. But let me go ahead and show you free transform, some things we can do with that as well. So with free transform, we can rotate the object, we can resize it, and a lot of times as you're resizing it, you'll notice it pretty much keeps the same dimensions of it in a sense, whereas it's not warping it or skewing it. But if I hold down Shift key, it will let me kind of warp or skew it. And that's important because if we move across the middle of itself, we can make a mirror reflection. So like, let's say I'd done these different changes and I didn't like those. I can hit cancel here, or if I wanted to keep those, I can hit the check mark. I'm going to cancel that just so I can show you one more time. So edit and free transform. And I'm going to click on one of these sides, but also hold down Shift so that it'll let me warp it. Just kind of move it that direction. Okay, once I select a one, I'm just going to release with the mouse. And I can start adjusting that layer there. Okay, so it looks pretty good. I'm going to go hit the check mark. Yeah, you can see it's pretty close to what I want there. So already we have a pretty good face going. So for now, go ahead and start with these tools, kind of get a little bit familiar with those. And then on the next tutorial, I'll show you some additional things we can use with that, specifically the eraser tool and how we can kind of use that in conjunction with what we've learned so far. And again, keep in mind, these are very basic selection tools, more just trying to give you a feel for Photoshop itself. And I'll show you more refined ways of getting selections later, but this will help you get started, get more comfortable before we kind of go into some of those more technical tools there. Okay, so I went ahead and jumped forward just a little bit, basically just cutting out those objects and moving them around, and then turning off the visibility on this background layer. So like, let's say you're completely done with this image and you're wanting to export it, whether that's putting the image on a website or wherever. So from here, you can save your project, go into File and Save to create a save file for it. So I'm going to show you that part as well. I'm just going to do Save on my computer. You can leave it in Downloads if you want, rename it here, your Photoshop document there. So whenever you're first saving it, it's probably going to pull up this box here, or it should at least. Okay. This is asking about formatting options. Just click OK. Just, a lot of times default things like that are fine. Okay, so we have this save file that we've created. See it saving down there. So let's say as you're working on it, you want to just kind of update that. And so I'll go and point out the difference between save and save as. The first time you save, it's basically doing a save as. From here, anytime I click save, it's just updating the file I've already created. Save as is going to be making a new separate file. So that's the difference there. But let's say I wanted to, again, export this to put on a website. So a lot of websites aren't going to recognize a Photoshop file. Like, they won't recognize that as an image. So we need to export this in a correct image format. So easy way to do that, just hit Save As. Okay, so it's still apparently saving in the background. So let's try it one more time. So File, Save As, there it goes. Save on your computer. And instead of leaving it as a Photoshop file, I'm going to change that to JPEG. So just this first option here. That's going to be a very universal format that a lot of websites or print or things like that should all recognize. So JPEG, JPEG. Click on that. Want to rename it, I can, but I'm just going to save there. So it's just asking if I want to replace the original one. I'm going to go ahead and rename it just so we don't have to worry about that. Do resources too. And again, this is just asking about JPEG options. I can just leave it on the default. But I do want to point out over here, you can see that all the layers are now compressed into one. And so whenever you export as JPEG, it compresses everything into one single image or one layer. That's basically what it's doing. I still have my Photoshop file separate with all the layers, but now I also have an additional file for the JPEG one we just created. So basically two different files, one Photoshop with all the layers, one that's separate that's compressed them all into one single image. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And that one should be done, but I'll go ahead and open it so I can show you what it looks like. Yeah, and there you go. So you can see again that one, just one single image there. Okay, and so that should be the last step there. From here you can upload it or do whatever you want at that point. But again, if you have questions or there's certain things that didn't make sense or you want extra help, just put a comment below and I can come back and help you with that more on it. All right. So again, I'll go more in depth on some other tools next time. So specifically the eraser tool, I'll kind of start to tie in that as well. But keep in mind, these are meant to be a step-by-step introduction to Photoshop. So we're not just going to jump into the most technical things. I want to build you up to that so you can understand how to use those a little bit better. Okay, again, if you have questions, put in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.